John DeSando.
Classics, let's go to the movies and share some popcorn, soda pop with our friends. Turn off our cell phones and get away. Night or day, it's John DeSando on the radio. We'll watch the credits from up high and low. Cinema Classics on
Cinema Classics is produced by John DeSando. It airs Thursdays at 8:01 p.m. on WCBE 90.5 FM. Listen to shows and read reviews online at WCBE.org.
I'm John DeSando.
And I'm Mary Yerina.
And this is Cinema Classics. And we're not going to get into a debate about what something is a classic or not, although we might mention our different...
Then what's the point?
I know, and there we go. But it is Cinema Classics, and frequently we take a contemporary film that has strong ties to the past, and that's what allows us to do whatever we want, actually, with Cinema Classics. So I noticed that Netflix now has La La Land, and I was very impressed with it, I don't know, maybe 6 years ago. So I thought we would look at it with the kind of the feel of a classic in the making. And so I said, who would I know that would be skeptical about that? Oh, that would be Mary.
And you would be correct.
So La La Land almost took the Oscar.
It took a lot of Oscars. I think it took 6 of the
Yes.
14 that it was nominated for, but it did not get the grand prize.
Well, there are some people out there who aren't as nerdy as we are about this stuff. What happened?
So at the 89th Academy Awards, the presenters for Best Film were Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway, and they had been given the wrong envelope, or so the story goes.
Yeah.
So when they opened the envelope to announce the winner, they had the Best Actress envelope in duplicate, which apparently they do at the Academy Awards. They always have everything in duplicate. And Emma Stone had just won that award for La La Land. And so they announced La La Land as the best picture, but in fact, after a couple minutes of gathering on stage and speeches starting, they were corrected by the producers of the show with the correct envelope, and that Moonlight, a very small film that was innovative in its own right, as many people view La La Land to have been innovative, actually was voted Best Picture. So there was great confusion and great controversy surrounding it, and many people still to this day feel that La La Land, and I believe you are one of them.
I am one of them.
Should have won the award for Best Picture.
And I'm thinking as you're describing it, it's really a fortunate mistake, because it allowed me for 1 second to see the number one film I thought in La La Land take the award and then not take it. And it's a memorable moment. Here we are, how many years later, we're talking about it.
7, 8 years later?
Yeah.
Yes.
And so it kind of allowed both motion pictures to take the award in some sense.
In some sense,
yeah.
yes.
And I think, Mary, I think La La Land will outlast Moonlight.
I'm not convinced of that.
Okay.
There's certainly, I think what the controversy enabled, although Moonlight had already won a couple of Academy Awards that evening, and it really was innovative. The fact that it got produced and got released at all, because it's an all-black cast, it's about LGBTQ community, it had a lot of firsts. In its own right, and because of the controversy, it actually gave it an opening for more people to be curious about it and see it, because at the time it was the lowest grossing Best Picture winner ever. So that was a hard mountain to climb for them to even get that number of votes. And you also have to look at the time period. These are 2016 releases. In the fall, we had a very controversial political election of Donald Trump as president, and those in minority populations were certainly feeling the divisions within the country, probably more so than others. So there was a lot of reasons that I think socially and politically, Moonlight ended up being voted Best Picture. But La La Land as a classic music. It certainly has some legs. It's been parodied on SNL. It's been parodied on other
And Ryan Gosling
shows.
is definitely on the ascendant.
Yes, and
Well, Emma Stone, goodness, 2 Oscars?
2 Oscars now.
Wow.
And in fact, La La Land in 2023, it was announced as being reconfigured as a Broadway musical.
Oh,
Now, whether or not that
yeah.
actually happens, I don't know. So, in terms of, it's still part of the, culture. It certainly is. But 100 years from now, are people going to be watching it and thinking, "Oh, that really represents the best of this era"? I'm not convinced.
Well, you captured that classic part of Moonlight that will endure because it is a groundbreaking film.
It is a
how many films
groundbreaking
have we
film.
seen where they're mostly black casts now? We just take it for granted. But at that time, it was unusual. And I think that the historians, as they will be looking at our show because they heard our show was in the top 10.
'Cause we're
of
classic.
NPR, right, we're classic. Some graduate student 100 years from now will be doing that. And they'll be looking at that. So I think that's it. I think that's good. Where I'm coming from with La La Land is that I just have an affection for Hollywood musicals, and I think they've done, notwithstanding Bollywood, they've done just the memorable job with their, particularly in the 40s and 50s, with their musicals. And so I saw this as bringing back the spirit of those musicals. Singing in the Rain, Our Town, all the, I've got a list that we might talk about in our podcast of musicals. And we might pick some that we like.
Well, and Damien Chazelle
Oh.
admits that he borrowed heavily from other Hollywood musicals, especially from what you just named would
Yeah.
be considered the golden era of the
Yes.
Hollywood
Yeah,
musical.
yeah.
Borrowed heavily and shamelessly
Yes, he had.
from many of them. Singing in the Rain, you mentioned.
I know.
There were 2 French films by Jacques Demy.
Oh yeah,
that he
the
borrowed.
umbrellas.
The Umbrellas of
Cherbourg, yeah.
So he borrowed a lot, even imagery-wise during the film. You have Ryan Gosling's character, Seb, grabbing onto the lamppost and kind of swinging around it, similar to Gene Kelly in Singing in the Rain.
Oh,
You
yes.
have when Emma Stone's character Mia flies off to Paris, you have the image of the plane and the globe going around. And
Oh yes, that's very Hollywood.
very 1940s, 50s Hollywood special effect that actually reminded me of Casablanca, the beginning of
Yes,
Casablanca.
yeah.
So there's a lot of homage, if you will, to those classic films that he and Justin Hurwitz, who scored the film and wrote, I think, almost all the original songs, except for the song by John Legend for the film. So you've got a lot of that going on. My problem with the film was that although it's an original contemporary take in terms of boy meets girl, girl and boy fall in love, girl and boy are trying to make their career dreams come true and can't figure out how to
Right.
do that together, and they end up not being together, but their dreams becoming
And
realized.
I like that part of it because
I
it's
did.
not traditional.
It's not
Right.
traditional, which I did like the tragic aspect of that.
Well,
But
it's,
my
yeah.
problem was how stilted some of the transitions were between these homage to the classic Hollywood
Sure.
and the modern story. And I just felt it was the story was slow to develop. It was actually, I felt, slow throughout.
Mhm.
And then you had what I felt were clunky transitions to
Well,
these
Mary, I think-
fantasy
yeah.
scenes that
I think
could have been better.
While I liked the montage at the end, it really was a clunky transition, and an homage to Hollywood's Dream Factory.
Right.
But in a film that was more rooted in reality than most of the musicals. I agree. It's just as jarring, and one that forces you to think, is this the real ending, or is this just a fantasy, or are they just doing a montage to show you how it all ended
The
so well?
alternative universe of how
Yes.
if they would have stayed together, everything
Yes.
would have worked out fine anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A remarkable part of this film is that neither Emma Stone nor Ryan Gosling is a professional dancer
Or singer.
or singer. And he's not even a professional pianist.
No, he learned it, how to play all of the
Months
numbers
before.
on the piano.
Yeah.
So
And-
that's not a hand model, that's actually him.
But it does come across his affinity for music because he's a classical guitarist. And so he comes to it with music in his mind. So that and I think most of the cutaways were right to his hands on that piano.
Yeah.
So remarkable. And she's just an amazement to me. And I really want to talk a little bit about Gosling in our podcast because I've talked about Stone before this. She's an amazing actress. She just doesn't strike me as a blockbusting actress, Academy Award actress, but she is. She ends up getting.
Well, she chooses and is cast in, although I'm sure she and Ryan, because you meet Mia, her character, not being successful, having moved to LA and gone on audition after audition after audition and not been successful. And she and Ryan Gosling actually relied on their own stories to help the film. One of the scenes in which Mia is auditioning and is in an emotional moment is interrupted by a phone call that the director or producer who's hosting the audition takes.
And Mary,
and that actually happened to Ryan Gosling.
And I need to interrupt you, and we can continue this on our podcast, Double Take. You and I were talking before we started recording, the difficulty of recording video. And so I get this time so that it's easier for me on a video.
Understood.
So Mary, what do you suggest about La La Land now that it's available on Netflix?
I mean, I certainly appreciated watching it for a second time, but that didn't make me as enthusiastic about it as you and my husband Bob, who actually watched this because it was a musical. I liked it. You both liked it better than I did. I know.
Enough said.
Enough said. Bob liked the film.
I'm John DeSando.
Cinema, 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 cinema. Classics, let's go to the movies and share some popcorn, soda